Today's session basically is going to be an introduction on Sitecore OrderCloud. We'll go through the agenda. Just quickly, some background on myself. So as Anita mentioned, I'm Rameez Akram. I'm a senior manager and a Sitecore and Commerce architect at Deloitte Digital, based out of Melbourne, Australia. I've done a session, I think, in the past as well on MACII. I think it was a year ago or something like that. So nice to be back at the Bangalore User Group. I'm looking forward to it, and thanks everyone in advance for attending. Okay, so I'll jump into the agenda. So I guess if anyone has any questions, we do have like Q&A at the end, but if you have specific questions on this, on a particular slide, feel free to ask as we go. So basically, I'm going to touch on a brief introduction and background of OrderCloud, look at what MACII platforms are, what MACII stands for. And then we're going to look at the platform architecture of OrderCloud, go through some key concepts and building blocks, and then look at the various supported e-commerce models that the platform supports. And then I'm going to touch a bit on some of the basics, such as catalog and product management, pricing and promotions, and particularly how you can extend OrderCloud. Then also we're going to look into the developer experience. And then at the end, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough to showcase some of the key resources that are available to help you get started. So what's OrderCloud? So for all of those who are in the Sitecore space, you probably heard recently Sitecore acquired a company called 451, which was started as a B2B first e-commerce company, and it's been around since 1999. So yeah, roughly over 20 years, quite a mature platform. And OrderCloud is basically their SaaS headless e-commerce solution built for B2C, B2B, and B2X customer needs. Looking at the platform itself, some stats over here that are publicly available. There's roughly 25 million plus transactions processed annually, with a 99.99% uptime, and revenue processed annually is around the 5 billion mark. So as you can see, the platform is pretty scalable, pretty robust, and performant. And just a quick note on this one, soon after the acquisition, as you might have seen, the OrderCloud website has been rebranded. So the product is now called Sitecore OrderCloud. So before we jump into things, right, and if you have experience with, for example, working on MACII, the paradigm is kind of shifting across the whole Sitecore stack. So we're going towards the MACII architecture, particularly in the space. So not just e-commerce specifically, but if you look at the DXP, the whole marketing stack as a whole, the idea now is to go towards a composable architecture where you can pick the best of breed platforms based on specific components of the whole ecosystem. So this is where MACII architecture comes in. So OrderCloud is a MACII certified product. And what MACII means, if you haven't heard of it, is it stands for microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless. What does that mean? Microservices basically are individual pieces of business functionality that you can develop and deploy independently. So you can think of it as vertical pieces of functionality. It could be handled by totally different teams, ideally. So imagine like parallel teams working together and deploying microservices for particular pieces of the puzzle. So in certain cases, you can have, in the context of commerce, for example, a particular team just focused on the checkout flow, a particular team just focused on the product details page, for example. So that's where microservices come into play. API first, so all the functionality of the platform should be exposed through an API, making it possible to tie different pieces of the application and services to combine and make a joint application on top of it. And cloud native, so the software and the platform itself should be entirely cloud-based. It should be built for high performance, automatic scalability. So as you know, services like Amazon, Google, Microsoft allow access to on-demand resources, and OrderCloud is actually built on top of Azure. And lastly, Headless. So Headless architecture focuses, again, only on the backend functionality, which allows users to build their own custom front-end experiences. So you're not tied to, for example, pre-built components that are part of the platform. You get a set of APIs, completely headless. And then this also provides the capability to implement a multi-channel or omni-channel strategy. So you can have the same platform servicing different types of applications, whether it's a mobile app or a website or an IoT device or an audio device, for example, for voice commerce. So this is pretty interesting space. Looking at the platform architecture, so this is a kind of a high-level overview of the OrderCloud platform. So I'll probably start from the bottom. So as you can see, if you look at the infrastructure, it's a multi-tenant platform based on Azure. There's 24/7 monitoring, security, etc., backups, automatic scaling, and seamless updates. So it's basically a fully SaaS product. So this is what you get out of the box. You don't have to worry about platform availability or security. That's all taken care of for you. In terms of e-commerce features, so you have the basics such as product and catalog management. You have buyer-seller management, order management, promotions and pricing, and then the ability to have multi-location, multi-currency, etc. And then depending on your implementation, you would have integrations into different systems, such as tax, payments, PIM, could be PCM from Content Hub, for example, and then different platforms for analytics, search, marketing, etc. And then all of this functionality is exposed through a RESTful API. And then on top of that, Sitecore provides a bunch of developer tools. So that includes an interactive API console. You have SDKs in different languages like .NET Core, JavaScript, and you have open source starter apps that can get you started, which I'll showcase later. And then you also have different integration endpoints like webhooks, middleware proxies, and an extensible data model. And then using this on top, you can build a customer experience that's optimized based on the type of customer you're servicing. So you can have, for example, a mobile app hook into the same platform. You can have different types of interfaces, etc. So one of the key things that I really like about this platform is, being headless. It's very dev friendly and language agnostic. So developers have full flexibility of the stack they want to choose, right? So for example, today the flavor of the month is React, Next.js. So you can design your head around that. If that changes in the future, you can just swap out the head and your core commerce or your core system, remains the same. And this is where composable commerce also comes into place. So you can pick and choose what you want to use out of the system. So to give you an example, right, out of the box, there is search functionality within OrderCloud, but let's say you wanted to extend it and you wanted to hook into a third-party system, for example, Algolia, and it's pretty easy to do as well. So you can basically compose the whole ecosystem with different solutions that you need. Just touching a bit on authentication. So OrderCloud's authentication system is built on top of OAuth 2, and additionally it supports OpenID Connect for single sign-on. And then in terms of flexibility of extension, we'll go through that as a separate slide, but it's quite flexible in that front as well. Next up is some of the key concepts of the platform. So these are basically the key building blocks, and these are the key entities, you could say, of the platform. So at the base, you have a seller. So when you set up your platform, you're going to have at least one seller organization, and this is the center of the setup that you see over here on the right. And then you have different buyers, and buyers basically represent real-world entities to which the sellers offer products. So, for example, in a B2B scenario, a buyer could be an organization. In a B2C scenario, a buyer could be an end user or a customer. And then you also have users. So within each of these groups on the right that you see admin, buyer organizations, and supplier organizations. You can set up users as well as user groups, and they come in handy to control permissions as well as stuff like pricing. And then you obviously have your product catalogs that houses your categories, your products, inventory, etc. And then there's an optional entity type called a supplier. So a supplier is basically used in indirect supply chain scenarios. So for example, if you have a marketplace, you can have multiple suppliers that are configured to supply or fulfill certain orders. So in a B2B scenario or a B2B2C scenario, if you look at a marketplace, you can have multiple suppliers in the backend, which are other businesses that fulfill particular products. So, I mean, this is a pretty flexible data model. So with these 5 entities, right, you can structure the solution based on the business. So we'll touch on that as well. So basically using these key building blocks, we'll look at 4 different types of e-commerce models that are supported. You can support more. This is just the most common scenarios, basically. The first one is direct to consumer or B2C. So in this example, if you can see, there is a seller on the middle, and then on the right-hand side, you can see we have end users or customers, and then you could have one or multiple catalogs, or you could have multiple brands. And on the left-hand side, you see that your products are fulfilled through, it could be a single distribution center, or it could be multiple distribution centers. You have the ability to provide either anonymous shopping experience or an authenticated shopping experience. You can configure unique product variations and specifications. You can hook into third-party ERPs, and you can integrate with other different types of channels. And as we look forward in the next slides, you can also unify your B2C and B2B operations into a single platform. Next up is a B2B scenario. So in a B2B scenario, basically, and this is a B2B marketplace, you can manage any number of buyers, buyer groups, and user organizations. So in this case, you still have the seller in the center. You also have different buyer catalogs. So as a business selling to other businesses, you can think of this scenario where you had direct customers. In this case, you have specific buyers who are who consist of multiple users, right? So you could have a certain organization, and there's X number of users in that, and they're buying from you. So you can set up basically specific buyer catalogs for each of those buyer groups, because you might be offering, for example, different pricing to a particular buyer, and then a different pricing to another buyer. So this basically caters to your B2B scenarios. You can again configure your catalogs per buyer. You can create custom category taxonomies, etc. And you can personalize the pricing as well. So you can have different pricing based on the buyer group that you're selling to. You also again have extensible payment options. So for example, buyers can create purchase orders, and then you can create sales orders, etc. And then you can either forward the purchase orders to multiple suppliers, or if it's a standard B2B, it might be yourself that who is servicing those orders. So in that case, you'll have something like a distribution center on the left. But in a marketplace scenario, you're basically the middleman, and you have multiple businesses over here who are fulfilling parts of the order. Next up, we have basically what we call a retail or franchise model. So in this case, you have a unified catalog, but you have different store inventories. And then you again have centralized user and store management. You can have multiple brands, as we saw in the B2C scenario. And this allows you to basically have a single view of the commerce operations at a corporate level. And this is where it gets really interesting, and this is where the power of the platform lies. Is as you saw, over the past one or two years, there's been a lot of change in the e-commerce space. So a lot of B2B, for example, businesses started selling to consumers directly because of the market needs. So a lot of businesses these days are hybrid. So with OrderCloud, you can have a combination of models. So in this case, on the right, you see that the boxes highlighted in green are a B2C only segment, and then the rest is B2B. So if you wanted to do B2B and B2C on the same platform, you could set up different buyer catalogs. The only difference in this case is you could allocate, for example, a certain buyer catalog as a B2C buyer. So you have a B2C channel over here, but you still maintain your B2B operations as well, and including marketplace. So you can have multiple suppliers again on the back end. Cool. Any questions around the business models before I go on? Cool. Okay, so next up is catalog and product management. So basically, you can set up one or multiple catalogs within the organization, and then you can configure those catalogs. So there's a concept called assignments. So you can associate catalogs to particular user groups or particular users, and that way you can control the visibility. And the visibility can be controlled not just at the catalog level, but all the way down to the product level. So for example, you can make all products visible to a particular type of customer or restrict the visibility to only a subset. Within the catalogs, you can have products shared between different catalogs and categories. So in this case, for example, you see this product over here, the Surface Pro, is part of a B2B catalog, as well as a consumer catalog. And then it's part of different categories as well. And this is really powerful because, again, we can control pricing. So you have the same product, but if you're selling it to a business customer, you have different pricing compared to an end user. If you look at search, you have all the standard search functionality like keyword search, faceted navigation, filtering, sorting, and then you can implement your integrations with third-party providers like Algolia as well. Really interesting point over here is you might have heard that recently Sitecore acquired another company called Reflection, and that's basically in the AI search space, specifically geared for e-commerce. So it's going to be really interesting how the search integrates into OrderCloud. But looking at it at this point, looks like it's going to offer conversational search. So for example, you could say, I want to search for t-shirts under $10. And then it'll basically serve up the products based on algorithms. So yeah, it's really interesting space to watch. Next up, we have pricing and promotions. So the way you set up pricing in OrderCloud is you create a product and then you create a price book, and you associate that price book with a particular product or variant. So it doesn't have the pricing on the product itself, which is slightly different from XC. For pricing, OrderCloud supports variable pricing, again, based on the type of user. So like we saw for business entities versus regular customers, you might want to offer, for example, bulk discounts for business buyers. So that's all supported. You can set up price schedules based on the combination of the product and buyer user groups. You can customize tax calculations, shipping, etc. And then you can also add price breaks, or what you call tiered pricing. So for example, if you buy one product, it's $10. You buy three, it's $8 each. So you can control the unit price by adding tiers. And this is really common use case in B2B scenarios. You also have a pretty strong rules-based promotions engine. And what OrderCloud has is this custom expression language that you see at the bottom over here. So you can basically use this expression language to construct promotions, pretty complicated promotions based on your use cases. This is just this is like, I guess, medium complexity. So it's 10% off your entire order when you spend more than 200 in these categories. So given that it's a custom expression language, right? You can combine conditions, so you can fine tune it. So in this case, it's saying if a product is of the bathroom category and it's greater than 200, you give 10% off that particular order. So again, this is pretty cool. You can build UIs on top of this to help business users to easily create promotions. Or if you're a power user, you can use these expressions directly. And then also you have the concept of promotion codes. So you can set up promotion codes and then associate them to particular basically promotions. And then you can control the length of the promotion, the redemption quantity, etc., etc. Cool. So next up we have the key extension points. So obviously, if you work on an e-commerce project, mostly you're going to have a lot of different types of integrations into ERP systems, perhaps a PIM, a CRM maybe. So OrderCloud really has 3 basic ways you can extend the platform, actually 4. So first one is webhooks. So webhooks basically can be configured in OrderCloud to extend the pipeline, you could say, with custom logic. So you can configure them only for post, quote, patch, and delete. So in this example that you see, there is a webhook to basically add some custom logic when a client submits an order. So you can configure your webhook over here, and within the OrderCloud, when the customer submits the order, it's gonna basically post that information to your endpoint, and then you can do whatever validation, etc. Or if you want to work with the third-party service to validate a particular piece of the order, etc. You can do that, and then you can return back the information and then complete the order. So you can use webhooks, for validations, notifications, or if you want to save certain bits of the information outside of the platform as well. So multiple scenarios. You also have the concept of middleware proxies. Again, I think this is pretty standard as well. So in certain cases where you have complex integrations, you usually have your middleware. So again, OrderCloud supports this. You can route the request through your middleware, and then you can basically validate or modify the order with custom logic. So this is actually intercepting the calls, and then in the backend, you're actually making the calls to OrderCloud. And this is, again, useful when you need to orchestrate or aggregate multiple calls. So if you need to talk to, for example, multiple systems and then return a response to the end user, you can stick in your middleware. And then next up, you have something called integration events. Integration events is quite similar to webhooks if you look at it, but basically the key difference is that there's certain basically configuration points that you can hook into integration events, and they're pre-configured. So for example, in this case, at the moment, they're in the checkout flow. So if you were to extend these particular endpoints, for example, if you wanted to calculate shipping, then you can hook into the integration events. And as the platform evolves, they're going to add, different integration event entry points, so you can customize further parts of the system. So some examples that we see over here is adding a custom price adjustment to an order, adding shipping estimates, or synchronizing order data with the third-party systems on order submission. For example, if you want to send it to an ERP. So again, combination of these 3 is a pretty powerful mechanism to basically extend the platform. Now, I don't have a slide for this, but I mentioned over here, apart from integrations, you also have the ability to extend the data model itself. So within OrderCloud, basically, most of the resources or most of the entities have this concept of an extension. So it's basically all JSON under the hood, so it's schemaless, and you can basically inject your custom JSON object on a particular resource. So for example, if you want, and it's similar to if you work with XC, right? If you wanted to inject, let's say, a particular set of properties on a product entity or an order entity, you can do that. And that particular feature is called extended properties. Okay, so next up, I think that kind of wraps up the the basics of the platform itself. And next up, if we look at the dev experience, so as I said, the platform is really built for developers. The documentation is very good. It has very detailed documentation around how to set up, for example, your projects, some starter kits, etc. Again, it's a pure headless solution. It's built on open API standards. You have full choice, to choose any front-end stack, whether it's Vue, Angular, React, etc. The tools that are provided to you are, number one, the portal, which is the one on the right you see over here, allows you to manage your instance. You also have a Postman collection with all the commonly used APIs. You have JavaScript, .NET, C# SDKs, and then you have various open source accelerators, including Head Start and Catalyst, which is an integration middleware library. Okay, so I think I'll quickly maybe spend 5 minutes just on a walkthrough, of the key resources that are available to you. I'll just pause my slides over here. So first up, what I want to show you is, so this is the OrderCloud website. You can go in here. Again, if you want to get started, look at the Discover section and the Learn section. That has basically, all the information that you need to get started. In terms of the portal, one thing I forgot to mention. So you can create a free sandbox account. So you get a fully featured, sandbox, which is performance throttle. But in terms of feature functionality, it's fully featured. You can get that for free and get started right away. So this is the OrderCloud portal. So I've created an account beforehand. And then quickly walk through the key areas. So you have your dashboard over here, and this is where you manage your marketplaces. Marketplaces is basically in the slides where we saw, the seller organization. It's been rebranded to a marketplace, so that's what they call it now. So if I just jump into here, for example, I've set up a sample marketplace. By default, in the free account, it's in the US West region. Within a marketplace, then you can start setting up your particular organizations. So buyers, suppliers, and then the particular user groups. What's interesting over here is the API console. So this basically allows you to interact with the platform. So think of it, as a supercharged Postman within the portal. So you can, for example, it basically provides, all the functionality that you need to interact with the API. So you can create users. So you have, for example, an admin section over here. You can set up webhooks, integration events. You can create buyers, users, user groups, catalogs, products, etc. Just as an example, I will show you. Let's see, I think I did set up a particular catalog. So for example, in this case, I want to interact with the catalog. On the top, you can see all the various methods that are available to you. So you can, get catalog, create new catalog, etc., etc. So I'll just do a quick demo. So in this case, I've set up a particular catalog. It shows a response, etc. And then you can also see a history of all the calls that you've done. So this is pretty handy, I found, when you're kind of playing around and you want to track how you set up stuff. So again, pretty feature rich, and you also have full API reference. So if you go to the documentation over here, API reference is, pretty extensive. So really a pleasure to work with the platform. Next up, I will go into the Head Start. So for all the developers on the call, this is interesting. So there's a couple of different ways you can get started with developing, right? The first one is the Head Start application. This is an Angular app. And as part of this, you have the middleware, which is an ASP.NET Core. And then you have two front-end applications. One is the buyer application. Buyer application is basically your customer user experience. So basically, a website that end users visit. And then you also have a front-end admin application, both written in Angular. Admin application is, where your business users will basically go into and then set up their products, catalog, etc. So one thing that I'd mention over here is OrderCloud again is a purely headless platform. So out of the box, the admin application is also meant to be customized. So you can use this particular head start, but then obviously based on the business needs, you can customize it. And that's really a strength of the platform as well, because if you look at complex implementations, especially B2B and B2B marketplace, usually your admin application is pretty tailored to the type of business. So again, you can do that using this. Over here, there's a couple of environments, so you can go in there. There's a QA. I would recommend, like, the demo bar is used for, I think, demos and stuff. So usually I play with the QA environment. You can log in, you can actually see how it works. I'll quickly walk through that. So this is the buyer application, and it's pretty basic. So the intention is it has all the core functionality, like in a standard e-commerce store. It's not meant to be used as is. So you take it and then you modify it from here. So this is an example of product search results. So you can see you have your faceting on the side, on the left-hand side, and then you can basically purchase products here, add to cart, go through the full checkout flow. Again, all the credentials are provided here that you need with it. So this is pretty cool. Next up is the admin app. So this is the admin app that administrators would use. So in this case, for example, this allows you to view your purchase orders. Let's have a look over here. Yeah, so for example, you can see all these purchase orders, line items, etc. You could look at all the products that have been set up. You can create new products. You can set up different suppliers. Again, with different suppliers, there's a bunch of things that you can control. So for example, what type of products they accept, whether free shipping is enabled, the countries they service, and then the particular buyers they service. So this is really powerful, right? So let's say if you have a B2B marketplace scenario, you could control which suppliers can provide products to particular segments or particular buyer groups. So again, this app again is open source. You can start with this and then you can tweak it, based on your requirements. Next up is another Head Start. So this is Head Start Next.js, and this was started, I think, recently. As you can see, a lot of recent commits over here. At the moment, it is partially complete. It's based on Next.js, and this only has the buyer app, if I'm not wrong, so it doesn't have the admin app yet. So I'll show a quick demo of this one. So this is interesting. So the way they went with the Next.js Head Start is there's no front-end styling. So it has all the core functionality. So the idea is the HTML is there, and then you can style it basically based on your own requirements. So if you hit this demo, you might be a bit alarmed, but that's because it's intentional. I'll show you a couple of the key functionality. So you have your homepage, you have your products. Again, there's no styling, so you just have to navigate this way. So for example, this is your particular t-shirt, your different variants, add to cart. You can see the count increasing over here. And then if I go to my cart, you can go through the checkout flow. So if you want to go towards the Next.js side, this is a good place to start. Okay, next up is, yep.
I think, but this is not using the middleware. It's directly interact with the OrderCloud, this Next.js application.
Actually, yeah, I haven't explored this in detail. So
yeah, I have explored and I have checked, and it's directly communicated with the OrderCloud. There is no middleware.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, yeah. So I guess the intention is basically to provide, just the head. So for like a standard ecom implementation, usually you would have some middleware, but I think you could extend this. So again, it's partially complete, and I think they would be extending this based on my conversations with the team. So I think watch this space. They might add integration middleware as well. So if you look at the Angular, basically head start, it has all three components. So I think as a start, they've started with the buyer app, and then that might get extended. But yeah, that's a good call out. Thanks for that. Next up, this is really interesting. So if you've worked with Vercel, so basically for Next.js apps, you can deploy them into Vercel. So Vercel has an integrations marketplace, and at the moment there is an OrderCloud integration in development. This should be out hopefully pretty soon, and this is really going to be interesting. So if you're looking at a future-focused starter kit, I think this would be the place to go to if you wanted to go with Next.js. So if you're not Angular inclined, so what this is using under the hood is basically Next.js Commerce. So Next.js Commerce is an all-in-one React starter kit. So this provides, your ecom starter kit, and once that integration is out, it'll be a single-click deploy. So you can start with that and then tweak the code. At the moment, I think they have integrations with BigCommerce and Shopify. So I mean, this is really, really happy to see this integration. That should really help, fast-track development. And if you want to look at a sample of the Next.js storefront, there's a live demo. It's not hooked up to OrderCloud yet because that's still in development, but the head is going to be the same. So if you want to get a feel of how the front end looks like, you can have a play with this. And I think that was about it. So next steps, I would recommend, again, going to ordercloud.io, get started, create your sandbox, look at the tools that I showed you, and then start development. And if you have any questions, reach out to me on Sitecore Slack or LinkedIn, Twitter, what have you, and also join the OrderCloud Slack channel. Really helpful people over there. And that's a wrap. Any questions? I'll open it up.
Yeah, I have one question.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I explored this whole product, so I found that it's P2P, and when we set up the buyer and seller application, so one buyer application will associate it with the default buyer. Okay, and then you can register there. All the registered user will be stored under that buyer. So my question is, I just thinking that if we want to roll out the B2C scenario storefront from this OrderCloud, because as their document they are saying that it's for B2C also. So as per this diagram which you have shown, it looks like that that default buyer will be always be there, and you have to put the whatever the scenario they have implemented in Head Start, it's a B2C. And if you roll out the multiple buyer application for each and every buyer, like franchises, so it's behave like a B2B storefront. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
This is the correct understanding.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's correct. So the idea is basically, the platform is all in one. So think of it like if you're developing something, right? And you see that there might be a future potential, even if it's B2C now, like some businesses might be expanding into different business models like a marketplace. So you want to set it up basically with this model, the slide that you see here, right? So you can set up a particular buyer group, and this would be your B2C, basically consumers. And then if you want to extend it later, let's say into B2B, then you can expand it. So this would be the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions from anyone? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, just one, like Rameez, just one basic question. Basically, like I'm a bit confused about that Sitecore storefront and like this Sitecore OrderCloud. Like if we just compare these two, like so OrderCloud is going to be replace the storefront on what exactly? So can you just explain a bit on these two things?
Yeah. So when you talk about storefront, are you talking about XC?
Yeah, business tool, basically. Sitecore, yeah, MACII business tool, yeah, correct.
Yeah, so they're basically two different products. So XC is, a self-hosted platform. So this is a headless, purely SaaS platform. So at the moment, there's no integration between the two. So basically, it's you either go towards the XC route or the OrderCloud route. And looking at the way the ecosystem is heading in general, it's heading towards this composable SaaS-based platform. So if you did have, for example, existing customers, right, on XC, you would still be using the storefront and business tools, but yeah, there's no relation between this and that. So for new builds, let's say if you had OrderCloud, it has nothing to do with the SXA storefront. So you would be building basically your own components on top of it, right? So depending again on the type of customer you have, right? Let's say if they already have SXA and they want to integrate OrderCloud into that same site, there's multiple ways you could create your own components that hook into OrderCloud. Again, it's headless, right? So it's all APIs. So that there's various ways you can do that. You can either do React-based components, or you can do MVC if you wish, or you can go, completely standalone, like with the Vercel integration that we saw with Next.js Commerce. So again, since it's headless, it allows you to basically either plug into an existing front end, or you can just use any of the open source ones. So there's also Vue.js storefront, there's React storefront, a bunch of them out there.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Good question, thanks.
Right, any more questions, anyone?
No, thanks.
All right, I think we're good then, Rameez.
Thank you once again, everybody. Thanks for attending, and Anita, thanks for having me. Any questions, shoot out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for the
Thanks,
session, Rameez. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.